Hello everybody. Welcome back for another video. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all doing okay. I know there's a lot going on. There's always seemingly recently a lot going on. Despite all of that, I hope that you're all doing well. Don't forget to leave a like on the video. It is a free and easy way to support the channel. And without any further ado, let's jump right into it. Yeah. Despite everything going on, despite everything we were going through, we are going through, we're currently walking through the mud through. Optimism still remains quite elevated compared to where it previously was before, if you will. Speculation is still abound as to where cryptocurrency prices are going to go. We heard for a while it was the April, May, and June time frame. As that slowly begins to draw to a close, there are a number of analysts who for the last few weeks or so have been saying and I don't know if you remember these numbers, that somewhere around the middle of July is when, if for a quick refresher of the last couple of videos, there was an analyst, I think it's the guy called Igrag, I don't know, one of the largest XRP analysts, was literally projecting, it was a $27 XRP by the middle of July. A lot of people have been screaming for a $150,000 Bitcoin by the middle of July. And I say middle, not the beginning, not the end. These people proclaimed that we would get to these numbers on a certain date. To also be lightly, the world is worlding right now. It feels like every 12 hours, not every 24 hours. It feels like constantly there's some kind of a multi-wrench that's being thrown into the machine where there already are 8,000 other wrenches. We're getting a lot of news about inflation rates and debts and deficits. I'm sure you've seen, I'm sure you've heard. The weirdest part for me is that this historically would benefit Bitcoin. If other currencies are doing bad, typically people would be putting their money into Bitcoin, and they are. And this would normally benefit Bitcoin's price, but some days the logic just isn't there. What else has it's kind of across the board, if you will. Really, though, with stuff that we've been going through and where the market is and people proclaiming and saying and waiting for an altcoin season and where Bitcoin's price is going to land next. It says Bitcoin's $200,000 price forecast is conservative. This was said by Bernstein or Bernstein, depending on if you say IE or EI. Bernstein reaffirmed their $200,000 Bitcoin price forecast, labeling it high conviction but conservative based on accelerating institutional investment and structural market evolution. I was just having lunch with a friend who was in the crypto space and remember I told you before, I managed years ago to get like 2 or 3 people in the market. He's one of them. We were discussing the crypto market, and he said he couldn't understand what was going on. He's heavily, I don't want to use the word heavily, but he's into real estate, and he's also into the stock market. They're 2 of his favorite things to put his money into. And he was saying that this happened and that happened and this took place and this took place and that happened. And he said it's really weird because there's billions Billions of dollars flowing into Bitcoin. Billions of dollars flowing into ETFs. If you've missed any of the news in the last month, people were cheering. 14 consecutive days of inflows into Ethereum ETFs. 24 consecutive days of inflows into Bitcoin, ranging in like the billions and billions and billions of dollars. The amount of Bitcoin being taken off of exchanges, never before seen this much. The amount of money, normal money, not just from ETFs, normal money, and even from corporations and institutions and sovereign wealth funds who are buying up Bitcoin is in the billions of dollars. We heard from over 25 companies who announced that they were getting into Bitcoin and or buying more Bitcoin. MicroStrategy is currently trying to raise $100 billion. I know that number sounds crazy. It's because it is. $100 billion to buy Bitcoin. Metaplanet just announced they're raising $5.4 billion to buy Bitcoin. One company said they're going to be putting in $500 million. Another one said a full billion. One said 1.4 billion. One said 180 million. And still, my friend looked at me in the face and said, why aren't prices reflecting all of that? And the most I could give him was a very strong shrug, because I also don't know. And I would like to chalk up the majority of what's been happening to tariffs, which are still being thrown into the air. Apparently, there's no... I think the next ones are the beginning of July, where we are supposed to hear blah, blah, blah is happening with blah, blah, blah. There are rumors that there are discussions taking place, but no one has heard anything. We're also getting a lot of countries who can't and haven't figured out how to just play nice because, how dare we in 2025 even think about having some kind of a peaceful life? But, you would assume that the billions of inflows would have influenced prices in some sort of way. Alas, the amount of analysts, once again, who are predicting, talking, chatting, as to where prices are going to go gets louder and louder. I just told you about the middle of July. That's also a very big thing that we keep hearing. We're also hearing a lot of, if you missed it, September, October. This is kind of like the new one. I'll tell you all right now, in case you forgot. I did say this. I told you we only really had until summer. Either early July or late July. This is not meant to scare you. This is to give you a reality check. The cryptocurrency market needs to move. When I say stuff like that, I see people on Twitter or other places who are uncontent with their own lives. Why are you saying things like that, bro? You shouldn't be. And it's like, no, I've been in this market for multiple cycles. Something is very weird. I know that we have the adoption. And I do heavily believe that what we're seeing is just really bad manipulation. But the problem is that the cryptocurrency market also functions based off of the movements of people like retail, the everyday normal people that we keep going over. If they feel shunned from the markets, if they feel like they can't afford the markets, if the markets aren't moving, the markets at some point will collapse. So prices only have really another month. And I pull back slightly and I say, if something spectacular happens in August or September and we hear about all the issues around the globe, if they magically end, if we hear that the Fed has decided they had a dream and they were visited by 3 blockchains, and they decide to, finally lower interest rates, like if something magical happens, but at the moment, the literal world reserve currency, is crumbling. and it's like ricocheting to the crypto market over and over. The weird part is that normally this would benefit Bitcoin, as Bitcoin historically thrives in terrible economic fiat situations. However, the corporations are here. Wall Street is here. And Wall Street doesn't care that Bitcoin is open sourced or for the people or made to go the opposite direction of inflation. Basically, what ends up happening is that if Wall Street and the corporations hear something in the news, they get spooked. They sell off their stocks, they sell off their bonds, they sell off their positions. Bitcoin is no different to them because they don't care about openness and freedom and everything else that Bitcoin is supposed to entail. So with that, we keep hearing that Bitcoin's on the move. Bitcoin's going to do this. This is going to happen. Bitcoin on this day is going to do this. Next Thursday, Bitcoin's going to be at this. By the time we get to this day, Bitcoin's... And I'm telling you now, the market has to move or there's going to be a crumble. And then we will re-enter another, what do you call it? Another bear market, and people are going to be really upset. However, I like to believe that because of the adoption, because of the inflows, that we will at some point get to a logical number. I like to believe that prices might not even go through a bear market. I am one of the people who believes in a continual cycle, just because of logically the hundreds of billions of dollars that we've heard are being pushed into the market and heard are also being raised to buy more Bitcoin. The firm cites the success of spot Bitcoin ETFs, which now manage approximately $120 billion in assets. That's in a year and a half. 120 billion, and MicroStrategy is currently trying to raise another plus $100 billion as validation for Bitcoin's role as a mainstream macro asset. This institutionalization is viewed as a foundational shift that reduces risk and enhances credibility. Bernstein contends that growing adoption by real-world financial entities supports long-term valuation growth. The report suggests Bitcoin trajectory is no longer speculative, but rooted in systemic integration across capital markets and investor infrastructure. My soul and my brain together tell me that this is true, but everything else around me, logic-wise, tells me a completely different story. We will see, as we have no choice but to continue riding on this thing that's spinning through space quite rapidly. Time will move forward. We will get to the middle of July, and we will get to the end of July. We will probably be having this conversation in one of two ways once again, and I hope that it is the more optimistic one. Prices have to move. It's not a joke. I've been here before many other times. It's mimicking 2020, 2021. We should be going higher, but there's a foot standing in our way. That foot needs to move if we're going to have an altcoin season at all. A lot of altcoin prices are still at their lowest point in years. There's been no movement up except for a small handful of coins. Cardano's not at $3. XRP's not at $5, $10, $15, $20. You know, something does have to give. A lot of people hold a majority of altcoins. Yeah. That's the Bernstein has joined the fray of predicting a $200,000 Bitcoin, calling it conservative. as many other companies have proclaimed, a 250, 300, or 350 $100,000 Bitcoin is happening this year as well. Okie dokie. Let's move on. Also in the news, Swedish health tech firm H100 Group AB. Their stock price rose by 45% on Wednesday after announcing that they have raised another $10 million to accelerate the firm's Bitcoin holding strategy. This $10.6 million raise is 5 times larger than their previous $2.2 million raise, led by Adam Back at the end of May. These companies are, do I have to say it? No. We're getting new companies every day, and as logically assumed, the other companies who announced before that they were going to buy Bitcoin are now buying Bitcoin. And it's happening every week, every couple of weeks. And we keep getting news like this all the time. So we will probably hear from H100 Group AB. I give it 2 or 3 weeks. They're going to try and do the exact same thing. All the companies are accumulating tons of Bitcoin. I don't know if we've ever gone over that, if we've ever spoken about the fact that there's almost no Bitcoin left and that the prices really aren't moving, and that institutions, companies, and corporations, in case you missed that video, in a year and a half, we were given 18 months if you somehow missed it. We saw in around a 6-month period, 550,000 Bitcoin was taken off of exchanges. That constitutes 30% of all the Bitcoin on crypto exchanges. That logically tells us it would take another year for all of those coins to dissipate. But I said 18 just to give it an extra 6 months in case something goes awry. However, the problem is that we're hearing about these new companies all the time. By the time that we get to the end of August, we will probably have 50 or 60 companies announcing that they're buying, they want more. Cool. That's the H100 Group. We only have about a year and a half left. I know it sounds dramatic, but life is quite dramatic sometimes when all the corporations are buying the most finite asset on the planet. And yeah, let's move on. In popularly unpopular news, the problem is that we got this news before. We got this news in February. We got this news in March. We got this news in April. And a lot of different news publication websites. I don't know if it was done on purpose. Probably. We're kind of announcing something different. At the end of last year, you might remember, we had a lot of analytics from Bank of America, from JP Morgan, from Fidelity, from BNY Mellon, you name it, who all announced that this year, in 2025, they were anticipating that the Federal Reserve was going to lower interest rates by at least 1.5 points over the course of 3 or 4 different interest rate cuts. This was only propelled further by the European Union, in case you missed it, who lowered interest rates 8 times. Yes, 8 times at 0.25 to get to an entire 2 points. That then rolled into February and March when the tariffs were announced, and I told everyone this is going to be a doozy, and the comment section went off. You have no idea what you're talking about. The market's not going to care. Alt seasons in a week and a half. And then we started hearing from Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, the people who essentially print the money within the United States. People kept on saying that we were going to have a mega QE, quantitative easing, the printing of money, that they were going to turn the money printer on full steam, and that we were also going to have 3 to 4 different interest rate cuts. And I kept on saying probably not, because the Fed is paying attention, because you have assets. The Fed cutting interest rates will benefit you, but not everyone else. You might not even remember 2 weeks ago, there was a situation where Jerome Powell said, no, we're not lowering interest rates at all. And that's when Trump was like, well, we're going to try and fire you, which I think he legally can't, but probably can. Anyway, what ended up happening is that he said, no, we can't do it. Because if you lower interest rates and you turn the money printer back on, inflation hasn't really gone down. You might see in the news that inflation is 2%. I just had to tell this to my friend as well. That inflation is 2%, 2.1%. But guess what? Your gas has gone up by 16%. Your electricity has gone up by 20%. Your phone bill has gone up by 15%. Your rent has doubled in the last 2 years, as has your water, as had your food. My friends, that's the true rate of inflation, but you cannot announce that on the news because it would cause a panic. So you have to have a basket, as they say, of goods, of bananas and bottled water and strawberries, and go, well, they only rose by 2%. And that's how you get consumer price index data for inflation. It's never the actual inflation rate. It is literally them choosing things to put into a basket to say, well, that's the things that we're going to count to show what inflation actually is. Those who hold the assets always benefit from inflation. House prices rise because of inflation. This is how the rich get richer. It's literally by printing money and putting it into assets and devaluing the currency that you're using, therefore rising the prices of the assets that you own. If they lower interest rates without anything actually getting better, or start the QE, when the money's already being printed out the hoo-ha, and tariffs are also raising inflation, that was also a discussion. A lot of people had to come to terms with that yeah, you pay the tariffs. That was the whole thing in the news. All the corporations were like, no tariffs, because we have to pass the cost on to our consumers. And that's why you saw that stuff in the news about Walmart. You know, they were posting the real prices and right. So Jerome Powell was like, no, I am not going to be lowering interest rates anytime soon. And yet we still heard in the news constantly that he was about to lower interest rates. And I was like, no, he's not, because he's said it multiple times. They have no intention of doing so, because while you have assets, the other 250 million people in your country do not. The Fed will keep interest rates at 4.25 to 4.5% until at least September, with no cuts expected this month at all. Surprise, right? The thing that he kept on saying he wasn't going to do, he is not going to do. Imagine that. Trump's trade tariffs and a stalled tax bill are driving inflation fears and delaying any policy changes. Did you see what was the thing? That the tax bill proposals that they're currently putting forth, the U.S. debt is currently at $37 trillion. This is more destructively insane than you could actually imagine. It's worse than you think. Think of the worst case scenario. It gets a lot worse. Now, these bills being proposed are going to raise it by another 13 trillion, 13 trillion in the next 5 years. If the system is buckling now, just imagine in 5 years when it's at 50 trillion. I'm sure a lot of you use social media, and you probably saw that AI CEO. I've never seen him before, but Apparently he's popular. He himself sounded the alarm. He said AI as we know it now, in the next 5 years, because of automation and companies looking for an excuse to fire people to automate and use AI instead, he said the unemployment rate is going to rise from 4 to 20% on paper. People with assets will benefit. The people without assets, that's every 9 out of 10 people walking by you, will not benefit. What do you think happens to the system when everything starts crumbling? So yeah, as of right now, we have word that at least until September, and people are using September as a golden star in the sky because he said nothing will happen this summer. That includes August. Therefore, July and August will have no rate cuts. And even in September, we heard last year that we were expecting a good 3 to 4 rate cuts. I do not think that we are going to have any this year from the Fed in the United States because things cannot be gotten under control. I think next year, when there is a new Fed president, I think we are going to get such a large amount of interest rate cuts that is going to cause asset prices to skyrocket. And then everything else will literally hit the ground. But a lot of people don't want to hear that because how dare we care about other people? That seems to be basically a sin these days. I think that's going to do it for this video. I do hope that you've all enjoyed. I do hope that you all are having a great day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, wherever you might be. I do hope that it is absolutely fantastic. Thank you all once again for watching, listening, liking, commenting, and supporting. And I will most certainly be talking to you all soon. See you.